Greetings, folks. Let's have a little chat today about what's considered meta in the game. I'll try to explain why a tank with armor generally outperforms a tank that doesn't have it. What's the core idea of this game? Exactly. To win. And to win, you need to deal damage, meaning you have to destroy your opponents, or capture the base, which usually happens after most enemies are eliminated anyway. Now, to deal damage, you need the opportunity to do so. Take, for example, a heavy tier 8 tank. It has armor, it has HP. It can take the initiative, push the fight, absorb hits, return fire, and keep the momentum. And it's not like it only has, say, 1500 HP. We're talking about a solid 2500 total value. Why? Not only can it trade that 1500 HP effectively, it can also block a fair amount of damage thanks to its armor. So it trades 1500 blocks 1000. And voila, that's 2500 effective HP to work with. To dish out that damage, most maps have what's called a key flank, usually just one. Let me quickly define it. A key flank is the most impactful zone in terms of deciding the outcome of a battle. It's also typically the area where both teams send the most tanks, which makes it the prime spot to influence the game and boost your personal stats. The other flank, that's mostly for tanks that didn't find a place on the main front. So on, say, Westfield, the armored tanks push into the terrain-heavy area into the fight, while tanks without armor wander around the map looking for a way to contribute. And what do they end up doing most of the match? Just that. Looking for a shot, for an angle, for a lucky opening. Maybe they get 1 or 2 shots off if they're lucky. Meanwhile, armored tanks are engaged from the very first seconds. They're shaping the flow of battle, dictating its pace, and actively participating. That's just one map, but we've got about 40 maps, and this principle applies on 2/3 of them, if not more. If your tank has armor, it can be effective on almost any map in any area, especially on key flanks. But what if your tank doesn't? That option is taken off the table by default. Take Object 752 as an example, a tier 9 tank. It's got a drum, just like the newer Char Murat. Both have 3 shells, similar reloads, and honestly, even their mobility isn't all that different. Sure, the Char is a bit faster, but not enough to offset one key disadvantage: no armor. The 752 does have armor, so when it wants to, it can push in, bounce a couple shots, maybe take 1 hit and unload its clip. Char Murat, on the other hand, can't do that. It can't peek out from an angle, tank some hits, and deliver its shots when it chooses. It can only do so when the opportunity is given, by teammates, by careless enemies, by lucky timing. Not when it decides, but when someone else allows it. And that's the key difference. So, what's left for Char? Wait, endure. Hope the allies clear the field, hope the enemies slip up, hope. But what if that moment never comes? Then you're left with no damage, no impact, essentially sidelined. Because a tank with armor and HP can play actively, no matter the timing or situation. But a medium, light, or even heavy tank without armor? It simply can't. So, to sum it up, an armored tank plays where and when it wants. A tank without armor only plays when it's allowed. Let's circle back to Object 752 and Char Murat. Same tier, so it doesn't matter that they're different classes. They end up in the same matches, on the same maps, in the same lineups. And because nearly every map has a key flank, and because most of the damage happens there, both of these tanks are pushed into competing in the same spaces. If you want to do damage and not just idle at base like a passive observer, you have to be there. And here's another crucial point people often forget: target priority. A tank without armor, when standing next to one that does have armor, will always become the target priority. And that's exactly what you'll see in the clip rolling now on your screen. You might say, well, in this particular moment, the enemy switched aim from the Polish tank to you only because you are easier to pen. And that might not seem like a huge deal in isolation. But here's the thing, this isn't just about that one moment. This same principle applies across all kinds of situations. Early spots during rollouts, holding passive positions, pushing in, flanking, whatever. It's always the same story. In this very clip, I couldn't even get a few extra shots in because I was immediately targeted. Meanwhile, the Polish tank survived just a little longer, enough to squeeze out an extra shot. Why? Because he had armor. He had to be aimed at and carefully targeted. You couldn't just snap, auto-aim, and pen him. Me? I didn't have that luxury. My tank is paper thin, no armor, low HP, while next to me stood a meta tank. Naturally, the enemies chose me as the easier frag, and that right there is the difference. So, let's string all of this together. We've established that the goal is to win. To win, you need to deal damage. To deal damage, you need to control the key flank. So, here's the question. Why would I pick the Char Murat when I could play Object 752 instead? The 752 does everything the Char does, and a whole lot more. It's more practical, more universal, and more adaptable. What's that? You say the Char's gameplay is just different? Ah, I see. And what does that gameplay involve exactly? Sitting in a bush at base, patiently waiting for someone to misstep? Letting others take the initiative, make the pushes, win the fights, while you hope for scraps? Not being able to impact the outcome when you want to, only when the opportunity presents itself? Right. That's quite the gameplay. Very compelling. What's that? You say I can flank, outmaneuver people, come around the back? Okay, sure. But hold on, let's be real. If I try to do that early or mid-battle, I'll just get deleted crossing a field. Enemies at base, enemies on both flanks. No matter which way I go, I'm getting caught in the crossfire. So, in the first 2/3 of the game, flanking is practically impossible. Why? Because my tank doesn't survive getting spotted. It simply dies. And maybe near the end of a match, when there's finally open ground or an abandoned flank, then yes, I can flank. But here's the catch. By that point, there's no one left to shoot. The game's already decided. Either your team's winning and you're just cleaning up the leftovers, or your team's losing and you're the last man standing, farming a couple of over-aggressive enemies before it's over. In both cases, the key moments have already passed. You didn't contribute when it mattered. You weren't in the fight when the fight needed you. So really, what's the point of playing a tank that gives away all initiative? Others controlled the battle. Others shaped the outcome. You just sat and waited for the table scraps. Let me say it once again because I keep hammering this in every video. If two tanks exist and one of them can do everything while the other can only do some things, that's not a different playstyle. That's a balance issue. And this isn't just about OP versus not OP. It's about meta relevance. Take the Object 705A. It's not a top-tier performer, not the strongest tank out there, not the easiest to play. But let's be honest, it's 100 times more useful than a Leopard or Tiger Mouse. Average solid, but it can play the game. It can be part of the action. Char Murat or any other Leopard-like tank. That thing's playing Survivor Simulator. That's the fundamental difference. You either play the battle or you play not to die. Do you feel that? That contrast? Playing the battle, being part of the fight, versus playing the patient game, waiting for one perfect chance out of 10 battles to maybe get behind someone on a corridor map. Yeah, good luck with that. Let's not forget something crucial here. Maps are random. You never know what you'll get. So why would I willingly pick a tank that only works on some maps, in specific setups, when I can choose one that's effective everywhere, every time? Ask yourself honestly, do you want to play the battle? Or play hide and seek? Depending on your answer, then, and only then, feel free to talk about playstyle. If you enjoy hiding and waiting, hey, more power to you. But don't confuse that with having impact. But if you want to play, if you want to progress, improve, and grow stronger and more skilled, in the current state of the game, as it has been for years now, you need armor, HP, ideally some alpha damage, and at least decent mobility. That's it. And this role isn't limited to something like the Chieftain before a nerf, which was overpowered, but can be handled by pretty much any tank that's in the meta. Even average or somewhat underwhelming ones, as long as it has armor, hit points, and a gun that's at least serviceable. Not absolute trash like the one on the ST2, but at least usable or even solid, depending on the tank. And perhaps even more important than the raw numbers, the sheer amount of damage, is the ability to deal it. The ability to play the game rather than just exist in a match. Not standing around uselessly because your tank is fundamentally incapable of doing anything, getting punished the moment you peek out. Meanwhile, a tank with armor can roll out in front of 5 opponents, take one shot, bounce 4, and fire back. It can trade, and by definition, it's playing. Again, it's not about how much damage you do, it's about whether you're even able to do anything in the first place. Whether you're just reacting to what both your teammates and enemies do with no real power to initiate, to influence the battle, to shape it, to force the pace. That's the point. At this point, you should probably be watching the second replay already, which is running in the background. The first one was on the Hurricane, and the second will be on the T110E5. And we'll talk about what you can take away from both. But before that, I'd like to introduce an idea, a concept that could draw a clear line between what makes a tank meta and what doesn't. Something that would distinguish a tank like the T110E5 from something like the Leopard in terms of gameplay. So what's the point here? Both the Leopard, with its so-called accuracy, and tanks like the T110E5 or Super Conqueror, anything with armor and HP, all fire within this aiming circle, where the shell is distributed randomly within that area. Or at least, that's how the devs describe it, Gaussian distribution, etc., etc. But here's the thing. For the T110E5 or the Super Conqueror, that randomness kind of makes sense. They have armor and health, they can peek, miss a shot, and try again. Their survivability allows them to take a few chances, fire multiple times, and eventually land the shot and penetrate. The Leopard, on the other hand, can't afford that, so how do you make this kind of gameplay genuinely viable? How do you make it a true alternative, rather than something that just feels strictly worse? The answer is simple. Tanks like the Leopard should be able to shoot exactly where they aim, not within some random circle. No weird spread, no shell veering off, just a dot. You aim at it, fully zoomed in, and the shell lands there. That way, yes, it makes sense. Then you have two different roles. The heavy armored tanks, which are bulky, potentially inaccurate, but tough enough to survive multiple shots, and the snipers, light, mobile, fragile, but deadly accurate. Then, the Leopard suddenly has purpose. Right now, though, you've got a Leopard with dispersion and no armor versus a T110E5 that also has dispersion but does have armor. So why would you pick the former? Why take a tank that does only one thing when the other can do everything? Especially considering that the Leopard often has to shoot from long distances, where that dispersion is even more punishing. And that's at least one good reason to lean into close-range gameplay. At least there, dispersion becomes slightly less of a problem. Up close, the circle tightens, and your shot has a better chance to land where you want. So again, why pick two tanks, where one does it all and the other does just one thing? Unless that one thing, like perfect accuracy, actually matters. If the Leopard always hit where you aimed, it would have a clear gameplay identity. A fast, sniper-style support tank that could roll up, take a shot, land it precisely, and then disengage. And that would make it both fun and skill-dependent. Meanwhile, the heavy tank simply can't do that. And that, you'll agree, would be a huge difference from what we have now. And here's one more interesting point to wrap things up. Almost no one actually considers this. A Leopard 1 with bond hardening gets 2090 hit points. In my experience, I block an average of about 100 damage per game in the Leopard. So if we add that to our HP pool, we're effectively getting 2090 effective HP in a match. Now, take the T110E5. In a recent 23-game session, I averaged 4,800 damage per battle. But more interestingly, I also blocked 1900 damage per game on average. That's not an isolated case, it's a solid sample. So with 2500 base HP plus 1900 blocked, the effective HP comes out to 4400. This means the enemy has to do 400 damage to take me out, not 2,500. That's massive. So just think about that. How is it even remotely balanced when one tank effectively has a 2k HP pool and the other one sits at over 4k? Especially in a game dominated by narrow corridor-style maps, where there is often just one main lane of engagement. And as I said before, if you want to play, to contribute, and not just be an AFK background prop, whether you're in a Leopard or a T110E5, you're going to end up in the same position. Those spots where damage is possible. But here's the key. One of those tanks can fight there. The other can only survive if it's lucky, if the stars align. By now, you've probably seen both replays. One was on the Hurricane with over 7k damage, and the second was on the T110-5 with 8k. Damage-wise, not a huge difference. But here's the catch. On the Hurricane, across the whole session, I averaged under 4k damage. Way under, if I'm being honest. On the T110E5, I averaged 4,800. Why? The T110E5 gives me the freedom to play, to pick a flank, engage when I want, bait shots, trade, and pressure. All of that. On the Hurricane, I can't. I can only sit and wait and hope. Maybe once in 10 games I get the chance to flank someone, or maybe my teammates on heavies soak up enough attention for me to get some clean shots. If you want to perform in a Leopard, Hurricane, or anything similar, you have to sweat every game. Like, grind it out. Every single mistake costs you HP, and HP is your life. And once you're out, you're out. 1 or 2 misplays, that's it, game over. The T110E5, though, it forgives mistakes. You go where you want, engage who you want, and shoot when you want. Even if you end up surrounded by 2 or 3 enemies, you can still survive. Even on 1 shot of HP. Because the tank can take hits and keep going. Because it lets you play. And yeah, people always bring up gold rounds, how they negate armor. Sure, against some tanks that might be true, but against most, it isn't. Why? Because of 2 simple mechanics. The random dispersion within the aiming circle, the plus to 25% RNG on shell damage, and pen. Together, these mechanics mean it's just not possible to delete a tank on command. Someone peeks, aims at your lower plate, and the shot hits the dirt, or the upper plate, or glance off the turret. That's exactly why armor works. Not because it's impenetrable, but because you have to aim carefully and consistently, and RNG can still mess you up. That's what armor is supposed to be, something you have to aim around, and while you're aiming, you get hit, you bounce, you miss. That's where the tanking happens. Not because you're unkillable, but because the mechanics create survivability. Now imagine if the Leopard had perfect accuracy, laser-like. Aim at the weak spot. You hit it every time. No random shell drop, no left-right deviation. Just a dot, aim, click, hit. That's the only way these glass cannon tanks could truly compete with the heavies. That's the only way a Leopard could go toe-to-toe with something like T110E5. Tanks that can roll into any part of the map, do what they want, and tank damage because of how this game's mechanics work. Take away the randomness, or rather, give Leopard tanks pinpoint accuracy, and suddenly they become legitimate counters. They punish overexposure. They hit weak spots every time, and that would be balanced, because they're still fragile, still punished for every mistake. But right now, all the weaknesses with none of the tools to offset them. That's the real problem, and that's exactly why armor matters. So here's the core idea. Based on the 2 battles you've hopefully watched, one with over 7k damage on the Hurricane and the other with 8k on the T110E5, we can draw a clear conclusion. You can sweat out similar damage numbers on both meta and non-meta tanks. That's not the issue. The issue is how often and how reliably you can do that. On a non-meta tank, a good battle is a rare occurrence, and it's not one you shape, it's one you adapt to. You sit there and wait, hoping the stars align and someone finally exposes themselves for a shot. You're not playing the match, you're just enduring it. But on a meta tank, you create your opportunities. You choose when to push, where to go, and who to fight. You impose your play on the match. You construct your fight, not just respond to it. That control, that ability to influence the battle, makes all the difference. It leads to more consistent wins, better quality gameplay, and ultimately far more enjoyment because what you do matters. And whether what you do is good or bad, skilled or sloppy, at least you're doing something, not just standing AFK behind your team, helplessly watching it all unfold. That's the difference. That's the essence of meta versus non-meta. The current state of the game, with its corridor maps, limited flanking options, and everything else, creates this meta. Tanks don't become meta because I say they are. I call them meta because they are, because they actually deliver effectiveness. And as someone who plays competitively and cares about performance, efficiency, and impact, not just sitting in a bush with a beer pressing one button, I want to play the game, I want to be involved, and to feel that my actions matter. That's why I care about efficiency, and that's why I highlight the tanks that provide it. And right now, in 2025, just like in 2023, 2021, or the past 5 to 7 years, it's armored tanks that deliver that efficiency. Not because I said so, but because the game's design gives them that power. So, before we wrap this up, ask yourself, what's your goal? If your goal is to play the game to actually participate in the fight, meta tanks are your path. But if you're content to be an AFK bush sniper, if you're okay with not playing, with just suffering through the match and praying for scraps, then pick whatever else you like. Just know that in the current state of the game, those tanks simply can't perform consistently across all 40 maps. A Super Conqueror works just as well on Ensk, on Himmelsdorf, on Prokhorovka, or on Malinovka. Sure, RT wrecks it, but that's a whole different story, because RT itself is a broken mechanic that undermines the game. We'll talk about that another time. But a Leopard, you'll be lucky if it works well on even half of those maps. And even then, it's not guaranteed. It's just too dependent on too many factors outside of your control. It doesn't dictate the battle, it reacts to it. And that's the key difference. On a meta tank, you fire when you want. On a non-meta tank, you fire when you're allowed. So ask yourself, what's more important to you? And with that, by now you should be seeing some gameplay footage in the background. Most likely, it's a match on the AMX M4 where I dropped 9k damage. I ran out of shells, and that's why I couldn't finish the game as aggressively as I wanted to. Once you're low on ammo, your playstyle changes, becomes more cautious, more survivor mode. But here's the thing. I had 2500 HP, took over 2k damage directly, and blocked 3200 more. If I'd been on a Leopard, I'd be long gone. That much damage would have been enough to kill 2.5 Leopards. But on this one tank, the AMX, I played the whole match, dropped nearly 9k, and did it on my terms. I fought where I wanted, against who I wanted, and shot when I wanted, and that's the power of a tank that gives you control. It's a completely standard classic match. The only reason I managed to rack up so much damage is that the situation just happened to play out that way. And I think you'll find it interesting because, let's be honest, tank players often aren't that focused on the actual content of the video. What they really want to see is a tank rolling around and going pew pew. So I do hope you've taken in everything I said and understood the key difference between meta and non-meta tanks, and why, if your goal is to play efficiently, to achieve results, to truly play for the win, then really, there's only one logical choice. Because when one tank can do everything and another can only do one thing, well, why would you pick the one-dimensional option when you've got something that does it all? To me, the answer is obvious. Of course, it's all up to you, whether you're ready to acknowledge that or not, and whether you actually want to grow as a player. If not, sure, maybe you'll leave a comment saying, that's just one style of gameplay. But as I've said, it's not really a gameplay style, it's a symptom of balance issues. And of course, don't play artillery. And now that's really all I've got. This last part's just a little post-recording note to keep things from getting too dull while you finish the battle. I figured I'd drop a few extra thoughts. First of all, if you swapped out that Charmurat for any other tank with no armor and no HP pool and put a heavy armored tank in place of the 752, you'd get exactly the same result. The only difference would be in the level of comfort each machine offers. Also, just to clarify, when I talk about key positions, I mean in standard battles, because those are the most common. I'm not referring to assault mode or grand battles or anything else. I don't play those, so I don't talk about them. Another very important idea I mentioned, meta tanks shoot when they want to, others shoot when they're allowed to. That's not an exaggeration, it's quite literal. You can be sitting in your comfy bush at base, but unless I, in my meta tank, choose to move into your line of fire, you can't do a thing. So, in effect, it's the meta tank that decides when you get to shoot. I thought that was a pretty sharp way to explain it. Oh, and let's not forget the whole issue of turbo matches, games that end way too quickly. When more players bring meta tanks into a match, the game naturally lasts longer. There are more bounces, more trades, more caution, because armor matters. You can't just fire at silhouettes and expect full pens, like with, say, a Leopard. Plus, heavy tanks take longer to reach positions. They're slower. That alone helps draw out the pace of the game. So, in a way, meta tanks are one of the few things helping to reduce the number of turbo matches. And then there's the new matchmaker system being tested on EU1, 5 TEDs, 3 lights per team. Still too many, honestly. 4 LTs, that's maybe 2% of battles. Most games still have 3 consistently. That should be capped at 1 or 2. And TDs, not 5, 3 or 4 max. Even 4 feels like a stretch. What we really need is a stack with at least 5 heavy tanks per team. At least. The matchmaker should aim to build more HT heavy matches. Then fill in the rest with 1 RT, 1 light, maybe 3 mediums, that's 5 right there. Add 3 TDs and that's 8. Finish off with 7 heavies or maybe swap 1 HT for another LT or MT. So there you go. A balanced, more strategic game. No more turbo steamrolls, just solid, well-paced battles. But yeah, I get it. That's probably not what most people want to hear. For many, it's still just tank go brr, shooty shooty. Of course, not everyone's like that, but I think you know who I mean. Now we're really done. If you enjoyed this, hit like, subscribe, and let me know what you think in the comments. And if you want to support Ukrainians, me, or the creator of this video, you'll find all the info in the description. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video. And have a nice day.